The junction of two gas and dust blades of the homunculus nebula became my prison for a long time. Even as the wounds of the origin of all light slowly healed, the machine spirit of the vessel remained racked with torment, unleashing a psychic wail in the warp full of discontent. At least 3 times I scoured the lower decks of an ever-multiplying population of insectoid parasites, scorched the nests of secret cults and banished warp entities, for otherwise they would grow stronger and would have further burdened me. Over time, the demeanour of the machine spirit softened. It reconciled with its fate, but intermittently emitted messages that I interpreted as lice crawling upon my skin. It referred to the fragments of wrecked barges, whose machine spirits teetered on the brink of oblivion, yet from which information could still be gleaned. Out of boredom, I took to studying the past of these wrecks, for a graveyard of starships is an immense source of data. This is Agromalek, and this is my log. Most of the ships here simply crashed into a cluster of cosmic debris shortly after emerging from the warp at Mandeville Point. Some perished in the warp, with wreckage cast here through randomly opened breaches. But there was one twisted ship that had been drifting here for time immemorial. The corpses of the crew intrigued me. The armour was adorned with oath scrolls, and inscriptions adorned their plating. I mistook them for bearers of the word, but then I spotted the imperial aquila on the chest plates. Their armour was painted in red and gold, and a frenzied black griffon emblazoned on the shoulder pad. Touching one of the bodies, I felt an acute, searing hatred of the 17th Legion, absorbed into their very essence at a cellular level. They seemed to be a reflection of ourselves. I found a reliquary, retrieved a journal, and began recording all I had learned. The Howling Griffons are staunch traditionalists who rightfully consider themselves instruments of the Emperor's divine will. The date of their founding is lost amidst the wars of the 33rd millennium. But it is known that the chapter continuously participates in military campaigns, distinguishing itself at the forefront of the fiercest battles. They are considered descendants of the Ultramarines. Often they split their companies to partake in multiple campaigns, and without the corresponding combat training and dedication to the Imperium, no chapter could achieve similar results or compile an impressive service record. For instance, the Griffons played a crucial role in opposing Abaddon the Despoiler during several Black Crusades. Later, the combined forces of the chapter ended the Orc threat at Gunnerdark. The chapter even halted the Necrotex of Narth, bringing an end to their small empire during the Plague of Unbelief. The Howling Griffons adhere to the Codex Astartes, yet they perceive it not as a sacred script, but as a military treatise composed by the greatest minds of the Imperium. However, they diverge from it when necessary, for otherwise they could not respond swiftly to enemy manifestations and adapt to new threats. Another reason for the deviation from the Codex lies in the high turnover rate. The Howling Griffons often suffer casualties and recruit so rapidly that the newcomers don't always have time to undergo the initiation to Brother Astartes, in order to fill the gaps in all 10 companies. From time to time, warriors are transferred from one detachment to another in order to deploy a fully combat-ready company on a mission. Meanwhile, another unit is sent for retraining or to replenish ammunition. The latter is viewed with disdain by the members of the chapter, but they acknowledge the necessity of such an act, while striving to transfer to a combat-ready company before it is dispatched on a mission. Thanks to their illustrious service record, they have been granted the right by the High Lords of Terror to recruit from several different worlds, the main one being Mancora. This feudal planet has become the home of the Griffons. The earlier historical centuries of this world have been lost. However, imperial archives from Segmentum Ultima indicate that the Griffons intentionally impede the planet's development and keep technological progress at a pre-industrial level. Griffin agents, operating secretly in the cities of Mancora, maintain the feudal city-states in a state of perpetual war, truly a direct reflection of ourselves. I chuckled and continued writing. The population forgets its past, but in such conditions, a warrior culture is forged, in which honor, respect for loved ones, and brothers in arms are paramount. This allows the Space Marines to select candidates from the ranks of seasoned, fierce fighters with a pure gene pool, characterized by natural resilience and perseverance. Though technologies of the Astartes may be unfamiliar to the newcomers at first, the Griffons can rest assured that their ranks are filled with individuals who are no strangers to the chapter's martial traditions. When the day comes for a recruit's ascension into the ranks of the Space Marines, his new life becomes a direct continuation of the previous one, albeit on a larger scale. He casts aside the heraldry of his native home and embraces the emblem of the indomitable Griffon. His allies in battle are no longer local nobility, and the state for which he fights is now measured in billions of worlds and is called the Imperium of mankind. When a warrior dons power armor for the first time, he discards the military training of his past life and heeds the words of Primarch Guilliman, who speaks to him through the Codex Astartes. Among the planet's glaciers rises the fortress monastery of the chapter called Proud Eyrie, under whose control are forges and manufactorums isolated from the local population. Workers labour day and night to replenish ammunition. Their productivity is enviable because they not only keep pace with the aggressive nature of the chapter, but can produce in quantities worthy of attention and service rare combat equipment such as the Land Raider Prometheus and advanced Mk8 errant power armour. The planet Mancora is notable for its population having an extraordinarily high birth rate of psychers. The codicils take an active role in the selection of recruits, sifting out those psychers who pose a danger and might become possessed. Those who pass the selection process become key units within the ranks of the Griffons. While most Astartes chapters adhere to the ancient ways of the Codex in training psychers, the future librarians of the Howling Griffons undergo initiation somewhat differently. As a result, they gain unique abilities that psychers of other chapters cannot boast. For example, a librarian can make his battle brothers stronger through a blood oath. The psyker harnesses his powers as he takes the oath before battle, binding the word, spirit and blood of his fellow Astartes with drops of his own blood. The result is akin to the strongest psychic suggestion. The soldiers become literally programmed to complete the mission. Sometimes on the battlefield, the psyker calls upon the warp and emits a piercing howl. This sound, akin to the scream of a diving bird, can strike fear into the hearts of enemies and shake their resolve. The howl is a weapon against the spawn of the warp, for it can sever their connection to the material world and send them back to the Empyrean. The intense hatred of the Howling Griffons towards the Word-Bearers and the Demon Prince Periclita has evolved into a full-fledged psychic ability called the Doom of Periclita. When the librarians use this power, a resonant field is created on the battlefield, within which the renegade legionnaires experience unbearable pain, significantly reducing their effectiveness in combat. There it is. I paused at that moment. Perhaps they nurtured their antipathy towards us so strongly that some patron arose for them in the Holy Kingdom with whom they were connected. Although these are merely my conjectures. Alongside martial traditions, elevated to the rank of Astartes brothers, they carry with them a spirit of rivalry that began on Mancora and continues within the chapter's ranks, but rarely crosses the boundaries of permissibility. Oaths hold a special role in the chapter, each representing unfinished business or an unresolved conflict, continuing until the moment of its fulfillment. Before battle, new promises are added to exceptionally long oath scrolls, some pertaining to the chapter's current objectives, while others are of a more personal nature. Once an oath is undertaken, the Howling Griffon will go to any lengths to fulfill it, even if it takes decades. Fulfilled oaths are a mark of particular honour, accorded their own scrolls and recorded directly on the armour of an Astartes. Oath champions, rather an intriguing way to motivate themselves, I exclaimed, realizing that I had long been speaking to myself. The extended stay here appears to be negatively affecting my consciousness. However, within the chapter, strict discipline prevails. So when the opportunity arises to fulfill an oath, the Howling Griffon informs the command. This is done to prevent the current operation from being compromised. These warriors value honour and the promises made, but will never jeopardize the mission. Of course, there are exceptions, especially when it concerns the Word-Bearers or the Demon Prince Periclita. The Howling Griffons hold their genetic legacy in reverence, thus ensuring the timely collection and storage of the gene seed. The material extracted after battle is sent to Mancora on the nearest battle barge. Without the gene seed, the chapter would quickly find itself on the brink of oblivion. However, following the death of the chapter master at the hands of the word-bearers, a corrosive hatred took root within the souls of the Howling Griffons. A profound wound transformed into a terrible genetic flaw capable of bursting forth onto the battlefield and consuming a warrior's consciousness. The curse manifests in 3 stages. In the first stage, a brother mentally relives the moments of the fateful ambush when the chapter master was slain. This occurs so frequently that the Griffon becomes obsessed with the betrayal of the word-bearers, seeking traces of treachery everywhere, unconsciously comparing anyone's actions to the pattern ingrained in his mind. Once the warrior detects the slightest correspondence, he must do everything possible to restrain himself and not execute the suspect on the spot. If he fails, an innocent may suffer, or at best a heretic may be executed. But in any case, the curse will begin to develop in the battle brother. In the second stage, the obsession with hunting the word-bearers intensifies as hatred for them grows. The cursed one deliberately seeks opportunities to participate in missions that might reveal clues to the whereabouts of the traitors. Even intentional falsification of intelligence before the briefing is not excluded, as well as an obsessive thirst for seeking knowledge and forbidden texts that could lead the Griffon to the chapter master's killers. At this stage, the Space Marine must resist the compulsive desire by all means, as this could endanger the lives of squad members and threatens mission failure. The third stage is the most dangerous, as the battle brother consumed by vengeance will do everything possible to find the word-bearers in any battle and make them the primary target. If the enemy is encountered, the Griffon will ensure the destruction of the renegades, even if it means paying a high price. For instance, he may abandon his battle brothers in distress, forsake the mission objective, or even pursue the word-bearers indiscriminately, even if it means traversing the Eye of Terror. This intrigued me greatly. Their curse resembles the genetic defect of the Sanguinius' sons. I am compelled to discover what transpired, for descendants of the Ultramarines were afflicted by a similar malady. As I examined the corpses of the Howling Griffons, I noticed that not all adhered to the standard yellow-red colour scheme. Some remained in black armour since the events of the Badab War, where they changed colour due to participation in warfare in the world of perpetual darkness. Only the pauldrons remained untouched, where a griffon was emblazoned on a red-yellow background. Then I came across a squad sergeant, whose helmet was black with a red skull, and later a veteran sergeant, whose helmet was adorned with a white insignia. I touched the oath scroll near the soldier's heart, and it responded with a hot pulse of fury. I found what I was looking for. It took some time to prepare. Soon I summoned psychic sentinels and positioned them in the necessary places, then delineated the walls with wards, settled into the ritual circle, and entered the sacred realm. The warp greeted me with hundreds of wailing spirits imprinted into the ship's hull. The souls of dead slaves and crew members now writhed in the talons of warp predators. In the moving, half-living corridors, among clusters of screaming mouths, grinning maws and glowing eyes, I saw tufts of light in the form of scars. These marked the places where reality had seeped into the warp and remained in the streams of immaterial energy. If done correctly, one could see an event imprinted in the immaterium. I remember touching the first available one and seeing squads of salamanders, silver skulls, and howling griffons attacking the dwelling of the Dark Eldar, the nightmarish city of Komorrah. They attempted to rescue crew members of the Forge Hammer from the inhuman experiments of the Drukhari. This was around the 35th millennium. No, not that. I angrily waved off the image and reached for another scar. This image was clear, like a painting on a canvas. Even the faces of the participants in the event were imprinted perfectly. The spirits memorized the details of the battle well. It occurred in the year 220 of the 38th millennium and was called the Arios Point Massacre. The chapter master at that time was Orlando Furioso, who was en route to Mancora, accompanied by the 8th Company and most of the veterans of the 1st Company. They were to reunite with the chapter and celebrate the 5,000th anniversary of the founding of the Howling Griffons. When the barge halted in the Arios Point system for resupply, they were attacked by the combined forces of the Word-Bearers and the Night Lords, led by the Chaos Lord Periclita. The Griffons were caught off guard and retreated to the surface of Arios Quintus from the enemy's superior forces. However, the barren world offered them no natural protection from the attacking renegades. The forces of chaos left no one alive, taking most of the equipment, including the irreplaceable gear of the first veteran company and the honor guard of the chapter master. The bodies were desecrated, and the gene seed was stolen or destroyed. The corpse of chapter master Orlando Furioso was nailed to the nose of a thunderhawk, which drifted in orbit of Arios Quintus, until other chapter members discovered it months later. After this tragedy, the Howling Griffons swore vengeance upon Periclito and the Word-Bearers. This oath they proclaim each time, especially when recruits join their ranks. I unclenched my fingers and released the image. The scar slowly began to contract to its former size, but from somewhere, lesser demon scribes and blue horrors clung to the edges of the scar to view it again. "A worthy offering to the Pantheon," I whispered. The brothers managed to tear out their spine, humiliate them, and inflict a wound that will not heal. I have heard that he is now called Periclitor, the Renounced, for he ascended and took an honourable place beside the gods. I noticed a silvery guiding thread extending from this scar to somewhere beyond. It seems that the next battle is there. The trace informed me of the liberation of Denna IV in the year 109 of the 40th millennium, during the long hunt for the Word-Bearers, led by Declemus the Vaunted. The third company of Captain Penvath Joachim responded to a distress signal from the agrarian planet Denna IV in the Sangramentia sector. It was a vital supply world, with extensive savannas where vast herds of thunderhorns, urboks and other beasts grazed. Denna IV was governed from fortified slaughterhouse cities, but the planet was dying from festering within, as the worship of dark forces had taken root among the butcher cults and shepherd clans. When the Howling Griffons descended upon Denna IV, they found that against the hordes of cultists and demon-possessed madmen, only a handful of city-states had withstood, packed with refugees fleeing the wave of massive slaughter that had engulfed the planet. Gravely outnumbered by the heretics, the Astartes landed in the savannah and conducted a series of devastating initial strikes against the traitors who fell like grass beneath a giant scythe. Then, the Howling Griffons moved on and lifted the sieges of the cities. The loyal inhabitants of Denna welcomed the Space Marines as saviors sent by the Emperor and eagerly resumed the fight to free the world from dark forces. A bloody war ensued, leaving a nightmarish imprint on the memories of the planet's inhabitants who fought shoulder to shoulder with the Space Marines. After the victory, the Howling Griffons vowed to protect the planet in memory of the many people who became martyrs for their loyalty to the Emperor, and the inhabitants of Denna IV thanked their saviors. They provided them with food supplies, and have since given their best youths as recruits to the chapter. The Howling Griffons, along with the 108th Cadian Regiment, participated in a campaign called the Valerian Purges in the 41st millennium. The image was so blurred and nebulous that I immediately dismissed it, and the scar closed. It seems that very little information about this event remains, or it was so insignificant that an imprint in the warp never even formed. The next significant operation was the Joran retaliation in the year 143 of the 41st millennium. After the betrayal of Joran, the general of the 15th Heraclon Ironclad's Imperial Guard, the entire battle group headed to the front line of the Gothic War, cut down the representatives of the Commissariat, and turned renegade. The Imperium was forced to take decisive measures when it became apparent that the reason for the betrayal was the vile corruption of the Dark Eldar. They led the general astray, and his personal unit succumbed to depraved psychotropic substances and the pernicious customs of Xenos. To the Drukhari, the renegades were merely expendable tools for enslaving planetary populations through betrayal and brute force. This could not go unpunished, and the punitive force prepared to unleash crushing might upon the Heraclons and their Dark Masters. The group consisted of 8 companies of Howling Griffons, supported by Ultramarines and Sons of Aura. The Space Marines intercepted the traitors as they landed on the feral planet Asturia. They were unprepared for such a furious counterattack, and most of their heavy armor had not yet been unloaded. As a result, more than 5,000 rebels were torn apart in the landing zones within an hour of the assault's onset. And when the battle began in earnest, the task of annihilating the traitors' headquarters fell to the 4th Company of Howling Griffons, who were dropped in assault pods directly into the heart of the bewildered enemy. The Astartes fought not only against the elite Ogrins, but also against the unnaturally lithe, malevolent shadows surrounding General Joran, engaging them with bolter-fire, flames, and unwavering resolve. Despite the grievous wounds from poisoned blades, Chaplain Armand Titus broke through to the traitor general and delivered the Emperor's retribution, cleaving Joran's skull in two with the Crucius Arcanum. The morale of the traitors was shattered, the vile Xenos abandoned their puppets, and a panicked rout commenced. The Heraclons were tracked down and mercilessly slain. 6 hours after the first volleys, the traitor army was exterminated. Upon returning to the fortress monastery on Mancora, Chaplain Armand Titus, who was already dying from numerous wounds, was with due reverence placed in the sarcophagus of a dreadnought to continue serving the chapter. From the year 906 to 912 of the 41st millennium, the Howling Griffons participated in the Bardab War. The operational tactical group was relatively small, comprising 250 Space Marines from the 4th, 6th and 10th Battle Companies, as well as several squads of Terminators. These Astartes survived during a prolonged seek-and-destroy operation in the Caradriad sector, where the chapter suffered substantial losses, particularly due to combat fatigue. The contingent was under-equipped for planetary assaults and had not returned to Mancora in time to join the righteous cause of the Loyalists. Honor forbade them from ignoring this call, despite the practical difficulties of conducting 2 heavy campaigns in succession. The Loyalist command immediately assigned the Griffons to garrison duties rather than frontline combat, and several small detachments were dispatched from the main forces to protect convoys. The largest deployment of Howling Griffons took place on the airless moons of the Chimera system to secure them from rebels. On Chimera, the Space Marines occupied several key defensive stations and listening posts. They intended to restore them and use them as a staging point for future assaults on the Bardab sector. Initially, no one obstructed the Griffons, but they were unaware that they were directly in the path of the advancing Executioners chapter, whose main forces were heading towards the Maelstrom Zone. They entered the war on the side of the renegades as repayment of a blood debt to Huron. During a sudden attack by the Executioners, the Howling Griffons fell one by one under the relentless onslaught. A series of crushing defeats led to catastrophe: the destruction of the strike cruiser Augeas and the death of the venerable chaplain dreadnought Armand Titus, which broke the Griffons' fighting spirit. When the defense platforms and listening stations were destroyed, the Executioners departed from the Chimera system, leaving the garrison, which suffered more than 70% losses, in peace. Observers from both sides noted that the Executioners could have capitalized on their success and completely exterminated the Griffon contingent. But instead, they meaningfully ceased fire once they had achieved their primary combat objectives and withdrew from battle. After the rout at Chimera, the operational tactical group's numbers plummeted, and without the aid of the Nova Marines, who swiftly redeployed forces to assist the Griffons, the entire combat zone might have fallen into separatist hands. Despite enormous losses, the Howling Griffons continued to fight, unwilling to shirk their obligations to the Loyalist cause until they were officially withdrawn from the war in the year 909. Soon after, the survivors returned to Mancora and were reunited with their comrades. They brought back the remains of the fallen on enemy-captured ships capable of warp transition. In the year 999, the Griffons accompanied the Dark Angels and helped repel the Thousand Suns' invasion of the planet Fenris. That same year, they sent 8 companies to assist the imperial defence during the 13th Black Crusade. The Griffons' first company, alongside the chapter master, pursued a warband of the Night Lords known as the Chosen because they had discovered a sworn enemy. The renegades were led by Demon Prince Periclita. The remaining chapter forces participated in the assault on Amistel Majoris. Breaking through the Death Guard's plague fleet, the warrior Griffons arrived to aid the Drukian Fen Guard, who were suffering heavy losses from plague outbreaks. For any warrior in the open field, a painful death and eternal enslavement as a plague zombie in the Death Guard's legions was guaranteed. The warrior Griffons and the Titans of Legio Astorum were the only force capable of resisting the Chaos onslaught, yet they too began to suffer losses. The combat zone soon turned into a plague-ridden quagmire. The decaying bodies of the plague god's victims formed putrid swamps. Ultimately, the battle was lost. The planet, along with the entire Agrippina sector, became the domain of Typhus the Traveller, who declared the planet Ulthor his own. The nightmarish visions of 1,000 astropaths spoke of the birth of a new demonic world within humanity's realms. In that same year, the Howling Griffons participated in the Indomitus Crusade, during which they managed to stabilize the situation in the Imperium following the appearance of the Great Rift. At the dawn of the 42nd millennium, they dispatched 3 companies into the Nachmund Gauntlet to defend the only stable corridor leading to the Dark Imperium during the War of the Beast. And in the year 111, 6 companies of Howling Griffons aided the Ultramarines in battling the nightmarish followers of Grandfather Nurgle during the Plague Wars. When I finished reading the history of the battles, I felt dissatisfied. It was not as rich as it ought to be. It seems that some information has been deliberately erased and over time even faded from the Immaterium. However, there remained one more chance to learn the details. I returned to my physical body and gazed long at the fallen veteran sergeant. Had he died recently, I would have summoned his spirit from the great ocean and inquired about everything. But now it was pointless. No matter my aversion to the use of omophagia, I had to resort to this method once more. When the ingested brain ceased to taste bitter on my tongue, images formed in my mind of the heroes of the Howling Griffon. I was already aware of the history of the fallen chapter master Orlando Furioso. The same can be said of the venerable dreadnought named Armand Titus. Yet my attention he was drawn to several other faces. The first was Joseph Vincennes. Some warriors from Watch Fortress Erioch suggest that he began his own crusade against the Tau in Jericho Reach. Vincennes vowed revenge on the Xenos after 2 members of his exterminator team were killed on the planet Innan. No one knows the details of the vow, yet he undertook dozens of raids into the Tau-controlled regions of space. His team's actions were ruthless. Many suspect Joseph Vincennes became a true expert in counteracting the Tau in Jericho Reach. However, due to his endless missions, no one was able to compile a comprehensive report on the information he obtained. The next was Chief Librarian Mersaino. When in the 41st millennium the Howling Griffons discovered a long-standing enemy leading warbands Chosen, they set off in pursuit to avenge Chapter Master Orlando Furioso. They discovered a demon world where, in the midst of a sea of demons, stood the throne temple of demon Prince Periclitor, carved into a mountain range. The demon himself awaited them, and one of the dozens of eyes on his face was distorted with the pain of Orlando Furioso's own eye. Many chapter members fell to the demon's sword before Chief Librarian Mersaino could slay him. The battle atop the mountain lasted day and night. Since then, the Howling Griffons do not tolerate anyone uttering the name of the demon in their presence. They nonetheless managed to fulfill their vow. Commendable. I did not wish to desecrate their bodies. They still reminded me of the word-bearers. Their zeal and fanatical devotion are worthy of admiration, and the number of oaths they make rivals our own. Therefore I ordered the cultists to commit their remains to the flames, and later used the hull of their ship to repair and strengthen the well of the worldwide. My own ship increasingly resembled a monster woven from fragments of bodies from old Terran legends. However, throughout my stay here, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Perhaps I'm not alone in this place where stars are unseen, in the outer darkness. It often happens that the most loyal ally possesses reputationally damaging secrets. There are plenty of such examples. Consider the Sons of the Lion and Sanguinius, who guard their grim secrets from the times of the Horus heresy. The loyalty of these chapters is unquestionable, but when a less well-known chapter emerges, immediate attention is directed towards it, for the potential emergence of a new heresy must be swiftly ruled out. Today we speak of the loyal Adeptus Astartes chapter known as the Silver Skulls. It is believed that they belong to the Second Founding and are the successors of the Ultramarines, but that was not always the case. Time has erased all records of their true origin, and the name of the Primarch progenitor remains unknown. However, some fragmentary mentions in Imperial annals suggest that they were among the most renowned chapters formed after the Horus heresy. They themselves are eager to discover the truth about their own origin, which is why the apothecaries have conducted countless genetic tests throughout the chapter's existence. However, the results have always been very ambiguous. Hints of potential progenitors are suggested by their armor and heraldry. They wear silver power armor, painting the shoulder pads black. Apothecaries wear white shoulder pads with a black vertical stripe down the center of their helmets. The heraldic symbol is a large, stylized silver skull, remarkably similar to the iconography of the Iron Warriors before the Horus heresy, as well as to the helmet of Barabbas d'Antioch. More or less significant results in the search for truth were achieved by Inquisitor Leandra Calers of the Ordo Hereticus. She struggled to gain access to the highly classified information and even visited the gene bank of Holy Terror. Eventually, she completed her investigation and presented the results. Although it was indicated that the chapter's gene seed was neither corrupted nor mutated, the information was decided to be concealed, for it could lead to the division of the chapter or even to a civil war. Their homeworld is considered to be the icy planet Varsavia, located in the galactic north of Segmentum Obscurus. The planet is distinguished by an atypical diversity of flora and fauna for a death world. Though the local lifeforms are hostile, their existence is considered a miracle, given the perpetual frost and the unstable orbit of the planet between the double stars of its systems. On the surface of Varsavia, there are 3 active volcanoes. As historical chronicles show, they have not erupted in the past hundreds of years. Of the 3 continents, life is possible only on one, which consists almost half of bodies of water. The south of the continent is inhabited by wild tribes, descendants of the first colonists. How they survived a series of cataclysms that led to perpetual frost remains a mystery. Nevertheless, these tribes now thrive. They are considered primitive by nature, yet they have been successfully coerced into belief in the God Emperor, and several of the Silver Skulls have been recruited precisely from these peoples. There are still several tribes that continue to reject the teachings of the ecclesiarchy, but this issue will be resolved one day. Their representatives are extremely resilient, so candidates for elevation to the Astartes or to replenish the ranks of the Astra Militarum are also drawn from them. The Silver Skulls are accustomed to training in dimly lit training cages in order to prepare for combat in harsh conditions, where the focus on enhanced superhuman vision is essential. And this yields results, as the Silver Skulls have a reputation as fierce fighters whose brutality on the battlefield is considered extremely high. They prefer to act as marksmen and unleash their potential where the effect of their assault will be the greatest, which causes concern among certain organizations such as the Inquisition. Perhaps the Astartes have been influenced by the tribal traditions on Varsavia, but they adhere to some unusual superstitions. Their librarium is not arranged according to the Codex and consists of elite librarian chaplains known as the prognosticars. These are the greatest heroes of the chapter, and no one disputes the fact that they are the governing structure of the Silver Skulls. The Prognosticars' Council makes the most important decisions for the chapter, and it answers only to the chapter master, Lord Commander Argentius. The chapter never enters battle if the Prognosticars have seen ill omens. Moreover, they claim that visions of the future are sent to them by the God Emperor himself, and this troubles the ecclesiarchy and the Inquisition. In the chapter's librarium, many tomes are kept under the collective title of Orthodoxy. These are collections of volumes of wisdom and prophecies from each individual psyker among the ranks of the chapter. They record their visions on the pages of books to pass on to their descendants. Thus, Orthodoxy ensures that every prognosticator of the Silver Skulls will be informed of the visions that have come to pass and those that are yet to be fulfilled. On the pages of these tomes are preserved many memories, visions, and indistinct dreams. Those that have not yet come to fruition are meticulously studied to assess their significance and credibility. Prophecies deemed insignificant are struck from the pages of the sacred tomes. In the northern part of the inhabited continent of Varsavia is the fortress monastery of Argent Mons, which translates from High Gothic as Silver Mountain. It's carved into the slope of the tallest mountain, which is laced with silver veins. The fortress is securely hidden from prying eyes, and only a few daredevils have ventured to climb to the summit of the highest mountain to catch a glimpse of it. Many have not returned, and the initiated see the fortress for the first time only from the windows of the transports that deliver them there. Before becoming a full-fledged space marine, a neophyte of the Silver Skulls must undergo a ceremony known as the Ascension Fast. The mystery of this action remains shrouded in darkness. However, details have come down to us about another trial called the Long Patrol. A candidate is sent into the wild depths of the Varsavia tundra with nothing but a combat knife for self-defense. Survivors ascend to Astartes, while the fallen are remembered with honor. It is believed that it is better to perish in the Long Patrol than to fail and become a chapter serf, which is the most common fate of a candidate. Alongside rigorous physical training regimes and sessions of mental indoctrination, each neophyte undertakes a long pilgrimage to the distant temple of the prognosticators for a personal divination. Upon successful completion of the pilgrimage, neophytes are implanted with the gene seed and become members of the Scout Company. Each ascended to the ranks of the Silver Skulls receives an audience with the chief prognosticator and hears personal prophecies and blessings. What the battle brother hears is intended only for him and is presented as a parable, the meaning of which may never be unravelled. Battle brothers never share their personal prophecies with anyone and may attempt to decipher them for the rest of their days. And this is not even the greatest peculiarity faced by the newly ascended neophyte, for some traditions might seem strange. Among the Silver Skulls, there is an entrenched tradition from the tribes of Varsavia to cover the body with tattoos depicting battle scenes, striking in their detail. This is considered an honourable act, but Marines are least likely to tattoo their faces, and this usually occurs only when an Astartes becomes a captain. Before confronting a deadly foe, they cross their arms in the sign of the Aquila, believing that this gesture can ward off evil. Each battle brother recites a personal prayer in the language of the tribe from which he was recruited. Such connections to their previous lives are actively encouraged, as the Silver Skulls take pride in their heritage, and those who come from the homeworld of the chapter typically adhere steadfastly to the traditions and practices of their ancestors. The Silver Skulls have their own crypt world, one of the 3 small moons orbiting Varsavia, named Pax Argentius. The chapter members believe that the spirits of the deceased and the souls of their ancestors watch over them from the moon, observing and guiding them on their life path. It is an extraordinary place with mausoleums and memorials occupying the entire surface of the moon. The vast number of memorials and monuments is particularly unusual, given that it is customary within the chapter to cremate fallen brothers. Whenever possible, the ashes of the honoured dead are placed in an urn carved and made from the skull of the enemy who took the life of the battle brother. Pax Argentius is a place where the final boundary between Astartes and the mortals who serve alongside them is erased. Here, the chapter members believe that the spirits of the deceased and the souls of their ancestors, as all those who swore fealty to their battle brothers, are ultimately treated as a temple after death. This is truly a spiritual place that often draws young warriors to its tranquil atmosphere. Pax Argentius is also a place where future chaplains of the chapter go to study texts and tomes, for only there can they truly comprehend the lessons of the past. It is also known that the Silver Skulls hold a memorial service, during which a long Varsavian prayer for the deceased is recited. The seemingly endless list of names, recited from memory during the prayer, enumerates all the departed brothers with whom the reader fought, side by side. Remarkably, some hold these names in memory, while others inscribe them upon their bodies. Another grim tradition of the chapter is headhunting. It is customary for the Silver Skulls to wear the severed heads and skulls of their enemies on their armour. The reasons for this unusual barbaric custom remain unclear. It is likely borrowed from the original customs of the Silver Skulls Astartes, recruited from the wild tribes of Garanda II, or perhaps the reason lies elsewhere. In the dimly lit alcoves of the chapter's chapels, several silver-plated skulls are stored, each adorned with a memorial plaque indicating the date and the name of the battle brother who took the trophy. The collection of skulls of powerful foes is more than a mere ostentatious display of pride. It is considered a mark of strength and honour. The chapter's artisans extract the skulls from their former owners and cover them with molten silver. Each one is an exquisitely crafted work of art, covered in spiral patterns. Tribal markings, sometimes matching the tattoos of the battle brother who slew the vanquished enemy, are engraved on the surface, marking each trophy as the rightful property of the original tribe. Each skull is another badge of honor for the battle brother who claimed it. For each skull, there is an exclusively unique memory, from the massive skull of an orc war boss to the fine elongated skull, to which a part of the spine is still attached, once belonging to a gin stealer. Each trophy has its own story. When not engaged in blood-soaked battles, the Silver Skulls prefer to gather to recount tales of their conquests. Especially eloquent storytellers can inspire their brothers in arms, regardless of how many times the story has already been told. However, such moments of peace are exceedingly rare, for the Silver Skulls do not rest their hands. The official Imperial Battle Chronicle records that from the year 290 to the year 310 of the 36th millennium, they participated in a campaign known as the Red Heresy. During the Age of Apostasy, an epidemic of the Red Heresy erupted in the Donlorth sector, heralding the grim era known as the Plague of Unbelief. It was here that the cult of the old gods emerged. Cultists incited a revolt in the hive cities, and their priests in red robes called upon billions of workers to cast off their shackles and reject their faith in the corpse on the throne. Then followed a horrifying massacre, which claimed the lives of administratum representatives, yet it did not escape the notice of terror, and vast fleets of Imperial armed forces were dispatched to the sector. In the search for a swift way to quell the uprising, the chapter of the Silver Skulls launched massive operations in a desperate attempt to kill the leaders of the rising cult. The hunt was catastrophic, with drop pods ambushed and several Thunderhawks shot down en route to their objectives. Only the arrival of the Dark Angel's forces prevented inevitable defeat. However, the Silver Skulls witnessed the Deathwing Space Marines departing the battle in pursuit of a mysterious Astartes in a cloak, who turned out to be the infamous Cypher. Before he escaped, a librarian of the Angels of Retribution discovered several fallen among the ranks of the Red Heresy. The Silver Skulls had to extricate themselves from a difficult situation. They did so, but openly condemned the Dark Angels and lodged an official protest with the High Lords of Terror. In the year 679 of the 36th millennium, when the rogue trader Lord Admiral Corlu was tasked by the High Lords of Terror themselves with penetrating the benighted Vale of Canth in search of the fabled Beta Garmon system, he invoked ancient familial bonds and secured a demi-company of the Silver Skulls chapter's 7th company to aid him in this perilous quest. With the chapter ever at the spearhead of the expedition, the system was rediscovered. However, the battle to take the glittering jewel that is Beta Garmon 4 proved bloody, and at its successful conclusion, Lord Admiral Corlu ceded the world to the Silver Skulls in honor of their services. From the year 770 to the year 791 of the 38th millennium, they participated in the Great Malagantine Purge, a military operation of the Imperium named to cleanse the Malagant sector in the segmentum tempestus of Xenos and heretics. The High Lords of Terror allocated 5 Space Marine chapters, forming the so-called the Manus Irae. Their role in this episode remains shrouded in secrecy, and records of the conflict are kept deep within the dark dungeons of Holy Terror. It is known for certain that the High Lords of that time personally granted these orders the right to spare no one and provide a bloody, dreadful example to all of humanity. The death toll reached hundreds of billions, and Space Marines razed entire worlds. For this, the High Lords granted the Firehawks a new homeworld, the feudal planet Costo 11, though subsequently some orders chose to sever all ties due to the merciless slaughter of civilians. In the forbidden heretical tome known as the Black Fragments of Cardinal Bloch the Reviled, it is stated that the Manus Irae consisted of 5 chapters, but only 3 are mentioned: the Silver Skulls, the Firehawks, and the Charnel Guard. At present, this is all the information on the Malagantine Purge. From the year 698 to 705 of the 41st millennium, the Silver Skulls participated in the Corinth Crusade that fought under the command of the famous chapter master Marnius Calgar, alongside elements of the Ultramarines, the Angels of Absolution, the Lamenters, Scythes of the Emperor, and Marines errant chapters, supported by 50 Astra Militarum regiments against the Orc War Scargor. The crusade drove War Scargor back to the world of Corinth, and ultimately Warlord Scargor was slain. This Imperial Crusade pushed back the later invasion of Imperial space by the Charadon Orcs War Argluk by 30 standard years. In the year 857 of the 41st millennium, the Silver Skulls chapter fleet blockaded the dead worlds of the Lazar system for 3 standard years. Nothing got in or out, and no explanation for the blockade of this empty system was ever provided by the Silver Skulls. In truth, the Silver Skulls had been engaged in a campaign against the Necrons to purge them from the system's worlds in vengeance for the destruction wrought by the Necrons upon the Silver Skulls' 4th Company. Though the main tomb world in the system was overwhelmed and obliterated by the Astartes, the Silver Skulls soon regretted their hasty assault as secondary Necron bases throughout the Lazar system were awakened to life following the destruction of the tomb world. Unable to admit defeat, the Silver Skulls chose to dig in, and what should have been a simple reciprocal assault transformed into a grueling military campaign involving the entire chapter. To this day, no outsider has ever learned the truth of what happened in the Lazar system. And in the year 859, the nomadic Necron overlord Anrakir the Traveller arrived in the embattled Lazar system and immediately joined his forces to those defending against the Silver Skulls' onslaught. Necron victory was finally assured at the Battle of Dreadpeak, when Anrakir's Pyrian Eternals spearheaded an assault on the Silver Skulls' downed battle barge Argent Hammer. Though the Space Marines battled hard against the veterans of Pyria, their efforts were undone when Anrakir seized control over the battle barge's still functioning weapon batteries and turned their fury on the Imperial defenders. With their chapter master slain and their forces in disarray, the Silver Skulls were forced to withdraw their blockade of Lazar, though they took great care to ensure that word of their defeat did not spread. His duty done, Anrakir took ship and headed out into the galaxy once more to aid the Necron cause. In the year 892 of the 40th millennium, during the sweep of Amos, the Silver Skulls first encountered the demonic force known as the Soul Maw. Their champion was apparently destroyed by the librarian Lucius Clave. However, this was not the end, for already in the year 954, the Soul Maw attacked Aragave. When the chapter responded to the distress signal, the demons quickly vanished, but within a year, Varsavia itself was under assault. In the absence of most of the Silver Skulls chapter, the warband struck at several worlds close to their homeworld. The librarians suspected that this would happen sooner or later, and they miraculously managed to repel the Chaos Force's attack. However, it seems the chapter had to recover for a long time, as the next campaign was only in the 41st millennium. It was named the Battle of Valoria Quintus. The Chaos Warband, known as the Oracles of Change, attacked the imperial world of Valoria Quintus, aiming to transform the planet into a new demon world. They succeeded in capturing the governor's palace in the very heart of the world capital and turning the city's population to the service of Tzeentch. However, the arrival of the Silver Skull's detachment disrupted the ritual of a chaos sorcerer. The chapter reclaimed the world in the name of the Emperor, and their leader was abandoned by his comrades and killed by a terminator of the Silver Skulls. In the year 998, the Silver Skulls participated in the Third War for Armageddon, deploying 7 companies. The ruins of Hades' hive, badly damaged during the Second War for Armageddon, were once again the scene of heavy fighting during this conflict. Space Marines from the Silver Skulls chapter were engaged in fierce battles in an attempt to prevent the Orcs from looting valuable metals from the shattered hive city for use in the construction of the gargantuan greenskin war machines known as Gargants. The 5 companies of the Silver Skulls at Hades' hive had to fall back from Yarrick's Hope Harbour after a tanker full of Orcs and explosives rammed the docks. However, the Silver Skulls struck back at the foul Xenos, having shown exemplary skill in infiltrating one of the Orc rocks to the southeast of the hive. Fighting their way into the core of the fortress and using the Orcs' own teleporter arrays to send thermic charges into the orbiting space hulks that had previously provided the Orcs with a continual stream of troops and war machines. In that same year, 998, the Silver Skulls chapter fleet encountered and destroyed a Red Corsairs strike force comprising several Executor-class Grand Cruisers. The surviving renegades made planetfall on several planets in the Gildar system, including its primary world, Gildar Secundus. But the Silver Skulls were not to be thwarted so easily. Captain Deris Arun, the master of the fleet for the Silver Skulls and commander of the 4th Battle Company, ordered his Astartes to track down the Red Corsairs and launch a planetary assault on the world of Gildar Secundus, where they had gone to ground. In the year 999, the Silver Skulls were involved in a confrontation with Xenos in the Zeist sector. The fact was that by the year 997, the expansionist activities of the Tau had reached the borders of the Imperium. Their activity was notable for the Tau Empire, sometimes resorting to the annexation of imperial planets through military force, rather than the more commonly used cultural subversion. Imperial planetary governors on the eastern fringes of the galaxy were calling for massive reinforcements to throw back the Xenos forces, but due to the ongoing assaults of Hive Fleet Leviathan and increasingly frequent attacks by the Chaos Renegades from the Maelstrom, few forces could respond to the call. However, one of the defenders of the Imperium who could do so was Marneus Calgar and his Space Marines. He dispatched the renowned 2nd Company of Ultramarines to the Zeist sector to provide a line of defence through which the Tau could not pass. Calgar also sent requests for aid to other chapters. When the Ultramarines arrived in the Zeist sector, they found numerous abandoned worlds, while others were heavily fortified to defend against the lightning raids of the Xenos. Cato Sicarius attacked the Forge world of Protonis 5 to halt the ongoing Tau offensive on this planet and used this momentum to push back the advance. He employed the same tactics as the Tau, which were ideal for the relatively small Space Marine forces, including rapid lightning strikes against weak positions to destabilize more strongly defended areas. The expansion of the Tau slowed and then halted under the onslaught of the Imperium. Eventually, only the world of Augura in the Zeist sector remained in the hands of the Tau, and soon the Ultramarines were no longer the only Astartes force involved in the assault. They were joined by the Silver Skulls, the Crimson Fists, and numerous other chapters. Despite the advanced technology of the Tau, they stood no chance against such a large force of Astartes. The fortresses of Augura, the shipyards, and the armament factories were either heavily damaged or destroyed by the advance of the Space Marines. With the loss of the last frontline logistical base in the sector, the Tau retreated to protect a safer territory within their borders. Although the Space Marines won the war and halted the capture of human territory, It was impossible to sanction a counterattack into Tau-held space, as individual Astartes forces were required in other parts of the galaxy to maintain defences against the forces of chaos in the midst of the 13th Black Crusade. Cato Sicarius reluctantly returned control over the defence of the Zeist sector to its planetary governor. However, the Tau soon attacked again and captured the strategically important imperial world of Agrellan just a few solar months after the conclusion of the Zeist campaign. Agrellan was reclaimed and renamed to the Mugalath Bay. During the events of the 13th Black Crusade, the fortress world of Cardia was destroyed. With the fall of Cardia and the loss of the network of Necron-built pylons, a great rift emerged, effectively splitting the Imperium in half. Loyalist forces found themselves increasingly overwhelmed as the power of chaos and the hordes of Xenos became unstoppable. Entire sectors lost contact with Terra, while others reported attacks from rampaging hordes of orcs, aggressive Tau fleets, or the Necrons' undying legions seeking conquests, facing expanding fronts of warp storms. Heretical chaos cults and rogue psychers rose by the billions, and it now seemed that every imperial world would burn in the fire of endless war. But not all was lost, for Raboot Guilliman was resurrected, and soon the imperial counteroffensive, known as the Indomitus Crusade, began. Since the appearance of the Great Rift, the Silver Skulls were among the most active chapters, fighting for the glory of the Imperium. Therefore, they were among the first to receive reinforcements in the form of the genetically enhanced Primaris Space Marines. Furthermore, Guilliman granted them the right to be considered descendants of the Ultramarines, forever settling the contentious question of their origin. The last officially recorded campaign in which this chapter participated is considered the Iron Crusade, or the Second Liberation of Mordian, which began in the 42nd millennium. When Imperial forces retreated from the Stygius sector during the invasion by the arch-enemy's forces, the Iron Hands refused to retreat and assembled on the surface of the besieged world of Mordian. Alongside a dozen regiments of the Mordian Iron Guard, they sought to reforge themselves and eliminate the weakness they had previously shown. They were joined by allies enraged by the defeat of Imperial forces, among which were the Brazen Claws, Fire Lords, Silver Skulls, Sons of Medusa, and Iron Lords. They arrived on Mordian to find the planet terrorized by a warband of the Night Lords, led by Arak, Deathshriek, and his packs of raptors. Arak planned to harness the terror wrought by his wars among the populace of Mordian to perform a chaos ritual that would plunge the entire world into the warp. The Iron Hands and their allies struck with their customary directness, emerging without warning from the warp and engaging the treacherous fleet in orbit, then attacking the capital. Clan Averni, under the command of Iron Captain Kanok Var, led the assault, while Arak directed his cultists against the weapons of the Iron Hands. One after another, the remaining clan companies joined the fray, and Arak was wounded by Var in single combat. When the Iron Hands landing zone was subjected to renewed assaults by renegades such as the Benediction Guard and the Cult of the Whispered Word, rebellious warlords from across the sector converged with the intent of utterly annihilating the Loyalist forces. And when the Imperial attack faltered, Arak, Deathshriek, proclaimed victory and led his fleet against the Iron Hands in orbit. It was at this juncture that Astartes from other chapters appeared, and the Night Lord's armada was trapped and routed, after which the newly arrived warships unleashed a fiery hailstorm upon the surface of Mordian. The orbital bombardment seemed chaotic, but it was part of a battle doctrine called Hammer and Storm, for while the tech marines of the Iron Hands erected void shields and fortified the bunkers of the capital, their foes were less fortunate. In just over a single solar hour of bombardment, the grip of chaos over Mordian was broken for the second time. Ultimately, more Imperial reinforcements arrived from Cypra Mundi, and the Iron Crusade was able not only to repel the forces of chaos, but also to assault enemy garrisons on neighbouring worlds. Then the Iron Hands Council initiated the second phase of the campaign, with the plan to cleanse the surviving worlds of the system and wrest from Chaos's clutches the refineries and orbital shipyards of the adjacent system. This campaign continues to this day, with the Silver Skulls valiantly fulfilling their martial duty, standing in defense of the Imperium of mankind.